some of the restructuring, and people who've been on that committee, if you're here, correct me if I'm wrong, is driven by budget. Right. So yes, I mean, we expect that there will be more layoffs. And for those of you who have, how many of you have seen the no forced layoff posters?
I saw somebody wearing a button.
And there are buttons.
Yeah,
and,
who has a button on?
Our message to the administration is sit down, work with us, let's figure out how not to have any forced layoffs through all of this. Our message is also, if you want to do a restructuring that's really meaningful to the institution, you need to guarantee people that they're not going to lose their jobs as part of the restructure. So that's part of the message. And then we also are saying to them, look at the administrative levels. How much have you done at the administrative levels? We know that there were 2 positions eliminated, but then they turned around and did promotions in giving people at the administrative level more responsibility. So was any money saved? Probably not. Right. Probably not as much as should have been.
Can someone tell us what has happened on campus thus far as asking layoffs? We're hearing little bits and pieces, but what really has happened? Positions been eliminated?
I'll repeat the question and then I'll turn it over to Gladys.
What has happened so far as layoffs? People aren't necessarily hearing what's been going on, and so that's pretty much your question. What is going on at this point as far as we know?
I'm getting my notes so that I get this right. I actually want to really take this opportunity to commend your leadership, your executive board, because we sat in meeting after meeting after meeting, and I've got it all documented in this book, in meet and confers, asking, are there going to be layoffs? Are there going to be layoffs? Are there going to be layoffs? And in every single one of them, they told us no, 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 no. And I think it was 2 or 3 days after the last time they told us no, they went to 2 staff members and said, oh, gee, we think we're going to have to lay you off. Not talking to the union at all. And your leadership demanded an emergency meeting with management and got that meeting and got the president to that meeting and got the president to say, you work with this leadership administration to make sure that they've been heard and that if there are any layoffs, that they are done properly and right. And so we finally did get them to identify exactly what was happening. And I think that we're in a position going forward where they understand they need to talk to your leadership. And this is what we've got. We've got 1 retirement. We've got 1.5. I take that back. We've got 2 retirements. Help me do the math. This should end up as 6.5 FTEs. Okay, we've got 2 retirements. We've got 1.5 through attrition. They were eliminating 2 clerical positions. And that should be 6.5. 5.5. We've got 1 lead mechanic. That was, I think it's okay to say at this point, offered Bessie. Okay, so that's 6.5. There is 1 actual layoff out of this, and that's where we stand.
Is that a temporary person that's actually out the door, or is it a permanent person that's out the door?
As far as I know, it shouldn't be a permanent person out the door. We told them that as long as there are temporary positions in the same class, that they have to eliminate those first, and they understand that that's what they need to do. Having said that, there was still one person that was actually getting a layoff letter, and all of that person's options were worked through very carefully with the union, and they actually changed the letter after our first review of it. So we're certain that the options were identified accurately. And it kind of depends on what that person does, how this is going to, eventually play out. I don't have the most recent information on that.
Well, I really do want to commend the leadership for being on top of this, because one more time, it does get complicated. But this is where we also need the help from the membership. If you're hearing anything, whether it's a rumor or if you have a question, contact the steward or contact one of your executive board people or one of your officers, because this is how we stay on top of this. And it's very difficult to make it right if we've done it wrong, because then somebody else is going to get displaced. But we need to enforce the contract to make sure that your rights are protected if you were laid off. And so it is in everybody's best interest to make sure that it's done contractually correct. So if you were given the wrong bump, that means somebody else is going to get bumped instead. So anyway, other questions? Thank you, Gladys. Okay, let's move on a little bit. So let's go back to Sam and down our flow chart a little bit. Now Sam is back to, well, he doesn't want to bump Joe now because he feels bad. And that's what I started to say when I was asking the sister about her layoff. Bumping is your right. And as difficult as it is, a lot of our language is based on seniority, because that's one of the only ways that you can apply any sort of fairness. It never really seems fair that somebody loses a job. And I think it tends to be particularly difficult in Greater Minnesota because we tend to see many, many, many long-term employees. Who in this room has been here over 20 years? Who in this room has been here over 10 years? Who in this room has been here over 5 years? Okay. Let me do it this way. Who in this room has been here under 5 years? Okay. Not that many. So that's one of the things that we try to work in is fairness by seniority. But you have to make the choice that's right for you and your family.
Can you differentiate between state seniority and class seniority?
Yes.
Each unit is different.
Yes. The question is, can I differentiate between state and class seniority? Yes. Not all classifications, or what we call bargaining units, go by state or class. Some of them are different. And a bargaining unit is, when I asked earlier who is a clerical, that's a clerical bargaining unit that's defined by law. But the union decides how we want to, or we bargain our seniority. And the clerical bargaining unit decided, about 4 or 5 contracts ago, that they wanted to go by state seniority. And at the time, to give you a little history on that, some of you will remember this, the clerical classifications went through what was called a consolidation. And we had many, many, many more classifications, and they consolidated them into a lower number of classifications, and that's when they came up with the office series and the customer service series. And the idea, well, one of the ideas for us was that for the most part, though not always, but for the most part, it created greater mobility for people. But with clericals wanting to change jobs more, because your jobs really are so much different, even though they might be the same class, you said, let's go by state seniority, because if I go from an OASI to an OASS, I don't want to start over again, and it would discourage me from promoting or transferring. And so they go by state seniority. So whenever we say seniority for clerical workers, it means state seniority. And healthcare workers, which you don't have any. All the rest go by class seniority. The trades, service, the GMWs, and the technical unit go by class seniority. So your seniority is determined by how long you've been in that classification. So you have to have more classification seniority than somebody in order for you to be able to bump them. Okay? Even though they may have a whole lot more state seniority. They may have been with the state for 30 years, but they've only been a GMW for 2 years. A 3-year GMW is going to be able to bump that person. And it's always discussed in negotiations whether or not your units, those units will go to state seniority. I don't know. But you always make the decision that you think is best for you, at least the people who are elected from your locals to make those decisions. Does that make sense?
Judy, just because I think this point is kind of confusing sometimes for clericals. The bumping and the layoff rights are within your class, but it's how much state seniority you have.